Hello and welcome to our 7th installment of Trustee Training. I'm excited to have everybody with us this afternoon. Today we are talking about human resources as it relates to the library board. So as usual, if you want to access anything I mentioned today, you can go to the link that I put in the chat to our LibGuides, or it is accessible by going to our website, library.nd.gov, clicking on Services for Libraries and Education. Underneath the cloud, there's the hyperlink to LibGuides, and scroll on down to Public Library Board of Trustees, and that's where you'll find all of the goodies. My name is Abby Ebach. I've been a public library specialist at the State Library for 3 years, and of course, I am not a lawyer. This is the obligatory disclaimer that anything I say cannot be considered legal advice, and please discuss all legal questions with your local attorney. I'm also not an HR expert. So, disclaimers out of the way. I'm going to do a quick review of the roles of the library board versus the roles of the library director, most notably as those things relate to staffing. So the library board is essentially the boss of the library director. This power is given to you all or the board collectively in Century Code 403804 number 6, which reads, to employ qualified personnel to administer the public library and dispense library services. However, I will again remind you that board members individually are not the boss of the director, only the board as a whole. Additionally, the board is only responsible for the staffing of the library director and not any other staff. The only role of the board with library staff is to set the salaries and the pay scale, since those relate to the budget, and then a personnel policy, since I believe somebody brought it up last week. That is a policy. The library director, on the other hand, they're in charge of hiring and supervising the library staff day to day. So fortunately, we're not going to go through that. As a board member, you should not be interfering with staffing issues. So if a staff member has a problem and they come to you about it, you should direct them to talk to the library director. The exceptions to that would be like if the library director is a part of the problem or they're not doing anything at all to help assist with alleviating this problem. But even then, you would want to be encouraging the staff to be working with the director and keeping them in the loop, and then as well with the rest of the board to resolve these issues. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can start talking at me or throw a question in the chat. So like I mentioned, the library board is in charge of recruiting, hiring, supervising, and evaluating the library director. So we're going to start with hiring. When looking to hire a new director, you want to look at your current job description and make any modifications. So having a written job description is an excelling level standard at the Coordinating Council Standard for Public Libraries. You'll want to discuss with the board or a smaller hiring committee what the responsibilities and duties of the library director are. You want to make sure that they're really clearly outlined in the job description. You're also going to want to discuss things like the minimum education requirements, work experiences, desirable areas of expertise, salary and benefits, and then any physical and environmental requirements for the job. So actual requirements, because you can't discriminate based on like physical means, but if there is a physical requirement for the job, you could list that. When deciding on pay, you want to make sure that it is competitive and fair for the work that you're asking a candidate to complete. So there are a couple ways to do this. You can always contact me at the state library, and I can give you a sampling of other library director salaries around the state. And then another option would be to look like at your local city and county structure and where other directors are being paid and kind of matching that level. So other department heads. I will say that if you're just trying to go on what the previous director was being paid or other libraries in the state, you can run the risk of offering too low of a salary. Just if somebody already was on the low end, they might not necessarily have been being paid what they're worth. Big proponent of competitive and fair salaries over here. So please do as much research as possible when doing that, when setting your pay scale. I do have a link to sample job descriptions on our LibGuide. So if you want like some fresh ideas or new job duties, you can tweak those from other libraries and adapt them to your specific library. When it comes to selection and interviewing a successful candidate, you're going to want to make sure that you're evaluating each person equally. So a lot of times this is going to mean having the same questions for each applicant and then like scoring them on a numerical scale, like 1 to 5, 1 to 10. This makes sure you're not bringing, well, it helps prevent bringing personal bias into the interviewing process. I again have sample interview questions on our LibGuide. I want to say that a lot of human resources tasks for the library are divided between the library board and the governing body that you work for. So, for example, the library director is probably considered a city or county employee and has payroll processed by that city or county. And then like the city or county's HR department is likely going to be the person that's handling things like benefits, retirement, sexual harassment claims, all that fun stuff. But overall, the library board is in charge of doing the actual interviewing and hiring of the library director. And then, okay, so I did include my disclaimer. Every city and county is going to handle exactly how this looks a little bit differently. One of the most common examples I'll find is like confusion around cost of living raises. So some cities are going to include the library director because they're a city employee. Whereas other cities will say, well, the library's budget is ran by the library board. The library board should set this cost of living increase. So that's something that you as the board and then possibly the director, if they're looking at it for other staff, is going to want to talk to your city or county finance director or the council or commission, whoever the relevant person is, to learn more about how that looks so there aren't any surprises. Okay, that covers our fun ones there. So once you have a library director hired, they're going to have to be trained in. Hopefully, there's somebody on staff already that can teach the library director about the library system, how cataloging works, etc. Different job duties, right? We're in North Dakota. We have a lot of libraries that are solo librarians. They wear 100% of the hats. Other ones have larger staff that can help assist in training in certain areas. It varies across the board. So hopefully, again, there's somebody either on staff or a lot of times a previous director can leave documentation, or there's some overlap in hiring dates that can really talk about these daily tasks. If not, those things are going to fall onto the board to make sure that the director has what they need in order for them to be successful in their position. I do new director orientations, but I can't orient a library director on a specific library. I don't know the ins and outs of all 80 some libraries in the state. I wish I did, that would be very cool. But the orientations that I cover are honestly a lot more like this board training, right? Very general things that apply broadly to all libraries, but not those ins and outs. So library policies, practices, anything specific to your library is going to need to be handled and trained in at that local level. So if one of your library directors puts in their 2 weeks or 1 month notice tomorrow, I really hope not, but if that happens, you really as a board want to make sure that there's a transition in place to make sure that a new director can be successful. Evaluations. should be occurring on both an informal and formal basis. So an informal evaluation, that's going to take place like at a board meeting, and really it's informal, right? So it's going to be any concerns a board member may have. They're going to raise it, right, about the director's role, or, hey, I thought the library was working towards this. What's the holdup? Those are kind of informal evaluations, just check-ins. The formal evaluation, this is typically going to occur once a year, and that's more like the annual review that we've likely all experienced and dread a little bit. So the director shouldn't be blindsided by anything that comes up in this formal evaluation. That would hopefully have been addressed like informally in weeks and months leading up to this formal evaluation. The annual formal evaluation is, again, an excelling level standard at the Coordinating Council standards. There are so many templates online that can help you find an eval that will work well for your library. I've put some of my favorites in our LibGuides. That can kind of help you outline what an evaluation should look like for the library that you serve. Most of them are going to use a rating system like 1 to 5, or exceeds, achieves, meets expectations, something like that. I'm a big fan of the ones that are more open-ended and don't have a metric rating scale. So I think it's important to use kind of that Q&A format. I find them more comprehensive and helpful as an employee. But again, you want to do what works best for your board and your library. It's very likely that it will be similar to the evaluation being used for other library staff, just to kind of make everything equal. The evaluation is going to need to cover not only the director's job duties from their job description, which, as we talked about, is very thorough, but it's also going to talk about any progress on the goals from the previous year, updates on how the library is doing on its strategic plan goals, and then more forward-looking goals for the director and the library. So there should be a self-evaluation component and a board evaluation component. And then these evaluations are going to be addressed at a board meeting. Due to North Dakota's open meeting laws, these meetings are open to the public. I do want to say that like the exact things discussed do not need to be in the meeting minutes. It can be as general as the library director received their annual evaluation from the board, and X is the outcome, right? This is also typically going to be a time where you would give a cost of living or performance-based raise. Once the evaluation is over, that's when it's customary to have the board president and library director sign it, not as an agreement, but just to indicate that, yes, this was discussed and we are all indicating that we reviewed it together. And then a record of that evaluation should be kept in their personnel file. An additional piece that you can add to the evaluation is an evaluation by the library staff of the library director. Or if you have a larger staff, the immediate staff that report to the director, rather than like all 30 or 50 of your staff. If this is something that your board chooses to add, timing matters. So that's when you want to make sure that the evaluation of the staff is taken before they're evaluated by the director and before the director hears their feedback. This removes any chance of extreme retaliation. So, for example, if I wrote something negative in my review of the director, I don't want them to hear about that until they've already given a review of me during my annual evaluation. All right, of course, I personally would like to believe that all library directors receive absolutely glowing evaluations and they're all fabulous and wonderful and have never done and will never do anything wrong. But that's not always the case. So performance improvement plans are a management tool. They're meant to guide an employee performance back up to expectations and to identify when that's no longer an option. So if there is an ongoing issue with the library director that is impeding on them successfully fulfilling their duties as the library's director, that's when you as the board need to step up and likely draw up a performance improvement plan or a PIP. This is going to outline the behavior or practice that needs to improve, a timeline of when those things need to improve, and then distinct benchmarks or indicators that show that they have improved, right? Or show their successful completion of this plan. That's the goal, is to get them up to par, get them to pass muster. There should also be a clear statement in this plan that failure to improve upon their performance will result in termination. So I 100% hope that this is something that you never have to deal with when you are on a library board. Library directors are typically only dismissed for like really big things. So violating the law knowingly, a major infraction of board policy, really big performance issues, and showing complete unwillingness or inability to improve. It's important, again, that you're not bringing a personal bias to this, but instead a specific problem and steps for it to be resolved. All of this should be outlined in a personnel policy. You're going to want to work with your local, again, city or county HR rep for their guidance. They might already have pretty standard procedures that your board can adopt and use, but they're murky waters. And quite frankly, I do not have an HR background. So anything much past what I just said, you're going to have to seek help outside of me. Last but not least, we're going to turn the tables a bit. So the board should also be doing an evaluation of themselves every year to make sure that you are all being as productive as possible and supporting the library's mission and vision. So this helps you see where you are personally excelling and where you might need further training and development, and then how that all comes together as the board. So where's the board excelling? Where can the board do better in training and development? A bonus perk of doing a self-assessment is that you're hopefully increasing your personal engagement with the work that you're doing for the library and growing the teamwork of the board as a whole to make a more cohesive board where you're feeling comfortable sharing these things and working together towards a common goal. This assessment is honestly very, very similar to an assessment of an employee. So it's asking you to look at yourself individually as a board member and ask yourself just some basic questions. Do you know the library's mission statement? Do you know the needs of the community you're serving? Are you familiar with basic library law in North Dakota? Do you come prepared to your meetings? Do you read your board packet? There's a really nice list that my counterparts in Kentucky compiled that I've linked on the LibGuide. And I really encourage you to look at that. It's about 20 questions that helps you see if you're best serving the library in your role as a trustee. The next step is to rank the board itself. So how well the board has followed the strategic plan. Have they given direction to the director well? Is the board communicating the library's purpose to stakeholders? Does the board have productive meetings, etc.? Then it's really time to just kind of look at these opinions and findings with other board members and see where there are holes or gaps, areas of improvement, where you're doing really great. You don't have to share, like if you personally don't know the ins and outs of library law, but a candid discussion about how the library board could pursue continuing ed opportunities might hold place for that. The board is only going to create a stronger library board that works together collaboratively for the benefit of everybody. I'm a big fan of board self-evaluations. I think they're a really good time for you guys all to work together. Oh, I have a question. When is an executive session should be used for performance reviews? Lisa, I don't think you can do a closed session for performance reviews per North Dakota laws. I can pull up the Attorney General's like guide to very specifically what you can go into an executive session for, and send that to you if you would like.
Yeah, just if there's specific issues that lead to termination, and obviously you don't want them public, or some of them public. So that's when I would see that you would need an executive session. But yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what's out there for requirements.
Yeah, and you know what? This is the end of my slideshow. I can pull that up right now if you would like.
Okay, because it's a public meeting, and a lot of times the performance reviews are not a publicly held topic.
But they are in this case.
Yeah. So then it's like, when can you use executive session?
You can, in North Dakota, it's my understanding that you can only go into executive session for negotiations on purchases or negotiations on hiring, I think. But you can't go into executive session for performance reviews in North Dakota. In Minnesota, you absolutely must. So it's weird.
Yeah. So I will throw the link to this in chat. I'm just going to quote a few parts of it here on page 2. But it says, generally, a public entity may not close a meeting to discuss salary issues or employee job performance. It may be closed for confidential or exempt records, dismissal for cause or suspension of a teacher, principal, etc. Talk to an attorney regarding a lawsuit. Yeah, negotiating strategy. For litigating a position of the public entity. And then that's kind of just about it. So yeah, as far as those more sensitive issues, I do believe those all need to be taken into a full board meeting, a full open board meeting, and not closed. Are there any other questions that I can hopefully answer? Oh, there's all of our friendly contact information again. If not, then that was our quick 1-2 on human resources, everybody.